Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report Spotlight. Today we have a returning guest, Daniel Ameduri. Back in 2008, Daniel called for Dow 8000, the collapse of Lehman Brothers, AIG, and Washington Mutual. During the mortgage crisis, he helped people buy put options on Countrywide Mortgage. These puts saw a gain of 1,400%. You can check out all his work on futuremoneytrends.com or go to the YouTube channel Future Money Trends. Daniel, welcome back to the Spotlight.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show, Dave.
Hey, thanks for being here. And let's start off with what's happening in the economy right now. And what's very strange is that Trump is out there, he's tweeting, he's continually out there saying he's bringing back jobs, manufacturing jobs are coming back, companies are coming back, unemployment is very low. And then we have the mainstream media. They're out there saying, ooh, recession in 2020, everything's going to start to slow, and we're going to see a recession in 2020, and things are going to get really bad. Now, we have Trump on one side telling us how great it is, and then we have the mainstream media on the other side telling us how bad it's going to get. What's your take on this?
You know, I'm torn about it because the fact of the matter is we know that Trump was right when he was a candidate, that we were in a big fat bubble, and we've got all this easy money sloshing around the system. We've got a global slowdown surrounding and outside the United States. But, you know, if you ask somebody in 2015 if we had gotten out of the recession, the average person, they felt like we were still in that recession. But it did begin to change when Trump took office. And you see that in the optimism numbers for businesses and the consumer optimism numbers. And now you see it actually in the sales and stuff for the holiday sales and the different reports that come out about job openings versus the unemployed. Now, we know these numbers are heavily massaged and the data almost completely can't be trusted at this point because it's so cluster screwed. But I do believe that Trump has fundamentally helped the country with the rollback of regulations, the tax cuts, and some of these renegotiations that they've done directly with companies to get them to stay here or through the tariffs. Now, it doesn't change the fact that we are living in an unsustainable economy. And it is disappointing as somebody who's a supporter of President Trump that he's taking such ownership of it, because the fact of the matter is as much as we want to say this is normal and the economy is picking up, we have to keep in mind we borrowed $1 trillion to do this. You know, it's equivalent to me going out and buying a 200-foot yacht on credit. And everybody's like, oh, man, Daniel's doing really good. Everything's great. He's richer than ever. Look at him. He's on a yacht. But the fact of the matter is now I've got, you know, $100 million loan for this yacht or whatever it's going to cost, and I can't pay it back. And that's essentially what the United States is. So it can't pay back the money. That's definitely not going to happen. So it's a matter of when do we hit the wall? And I don't know that. So is Trump helping? He sure is. Maybe he bought us another 3 to 5 years if we're lucky. Because let's be honest, nobody wants to go through a major financial collapse or reset. It'll be very painful and very difficult on millions and millions of people. So Trump has helped, but I don't think it's nearly as great as he thinks or wants it to be.
Now, he continually mentions that he has this magic wand. What do you think this magic wand is?
I think the magic wand is just not stabbing American workers in the back constantly with these globalists, you know, who basically purposely actually put the United States at a disadvantage, trying to help the rest of the world recover from World War II, later trying to help the emerging markets emerge. But these policies were never removed. So now you have countries like China or Europe or a country like Japan where they're able to take advantage of the United States in these very friendly trade agreements that were set in place to help those countries. But they no longer need help. They're beyond being even a competitor. They're dominating the U.S. in many of our industries, including some of the technology industries that are actually birthed from the United States, but then stolen and copied and used in China illegally. So I think the magic wand for Trump is first of all not sabotaging the American worker and actually having an advocate out there who's trying to defend the interests of the United States. I am not a globalist. I'm also not a nationalist. But I do see that if other countries like Russia and China specifically have leaders and politicians that are out there aggressively trying to represent their people, for the United States not to have that, obviously it's going to hurt the average person, hurt the average worker. And I think that is the part of the magic wand. One part of his magic wand I hope that he sees in his reelection bid is that the majority of Americans support cannabis. And we are having a jobs boom in California in that space. In Colorado, they're generating $250 million in just tax revenue. This doesn't include all the jobs and the derivative jobs. And now that it's legal in Michigan, I think there's a very realistic chance that President Trump might openly come out in favor of decriminalizing it because, let's be real, the Democrats are definitely going to be in favor of decriminalizing it. Trump's already said he's open to it, and it creates jobs. Why not?
What kind of jobs does it create with decriminalizing cannabis?
There's all sorts of jobs. So you have your derivative jobs. So people, when they think of cannabis, they think of like planting the crop and growing it, which is one part. So the tools to do the agriculture portion of it. If we're able ever to export it or import, there will be more jobs in the transportation of cannabis. There's jobs in the dispensaries, the manufacturing of the gummies, the health studies and health practices, because some of it's just purely used for medical purposes. So there's a lot of jobs. And of course, there's also the velocity of money. The cannabis the person who works at a cannabis dispensary will then take that money to Chili's, to ExxonMobil, to the rent, and it'll actually help the economy overall. One of the things I was speaking to a company that does security for cannabis companies, and I asked him, I go, why doesn't Budweiser have armed guards? And I had no idea, but he's like, look, when Budweiser has those trucks you see on the street, and they're making their deliveries at 7-Eleven, that's about $100,000 worth of product. When you're transporting cannabis in that same vehicle, that's $25 million. So it's a fascinating industry. I'm fascinated by it, at least anyway. And if anybody's interested, I have just written something at futuremoneytrends.com/cash. If you just go to futuremoneytrends.com/cash, and basically it's everything you need to know about the cannabis space, the different opportunities you can participate in, but most importantly, the dangers. Because honestly, most people are not making money in the cannabis space because it's so early still.
Now, we were talking about the economy and Trump, letting everyone know the economy is doing great. He always tweets out that the economy is doing fantastic. But we have the central bankers out there, like the IMF and the ECB and everywhere else around the world. It seems like they're talking about a global slowdown compared to the United States, where we're looking at everything and everything is fantastic. So why do we have two separate things going on right now? The United States is doing fantastic. The IMF and the rest of the European communities, they see things falling apart.
I'd say it's a combination of things. Number one, we have the world's reserve currency. So people simply need dollar bills, and wealthy institutions that want liquidity or are looking for a safe haven, they use the dollar over other currencies, which allows the United States to do this borrowing that we were talking about that's keeping the economy propped up in exchange for all the goods and all the services that you need. We just need to keep creating this paper money. Another thing is the world is ahead of us on socialism, which is why you're seeing Europe in such shambles and so many issues over there. Socialism works like any experiment. It always works in the beginning. But there is no example of a poor country becoming wealthy or prosperous or happy citizens from implementing socialism and then becoming great. It's always the same story. They become great with capitalism, and oftentimes a combination of capitalism and democracy, and then they hand the baton over to socialism. It works for, let's say, 5 years, 10 years, maybe 20 years, but eventually it leads to where Europe is today, where you have Italians, 18 to 34-year-olds have nearly a 50% unemployment rate. So I think that's where Europe is really starting to deal with socialist policies that went into effect 20 years ago. The United States, we suffer from a lot of that too. When you look at like Social Security, for example, it's a totally bankrupted system. But it's appeared that it's worked because it was sucking out of a prosperous economy and a prosperous free market that built the United States. But this experiment lasted a lot longer than most socialist policies, but in the end, it's unsustainable. It doesn't work, and now we're facing the consequence of a situation where, aside from interest and our entitlement programs, we have no money left. We're borrowing money to pay for everything else.
Now, add on top of that, Trump is ending the wars like in Syria. Now, if we go back in time, the neocons, the deep state, they were, planning to take over the Middle East to make sure that all those countries, used their oil and made sure that everyone sold their oil with the dollar. Now that Trump is ending the war and bringing troops home, these countries will be able to sell their oil not using the dollar. I mean, is this going to affect the Federal Reserve, the petrodollar system that was set up in 71?
It's a fascinating question, because the United States has acted as security for dictators and very cruel tyrants in the Middle East. And they've had this arrangement in such a way, as you just said, the 1971, where we provide security for these thugs by being thugs. And they make sure the dollar is the supreme currency. So it will be interesting to see if Trump can even accomplish this, because what he's trying to accomplish and going against the military-industrial complex, that's the type of thing that makes presidents go away. So I am concerned for him personally, and I wonder what will happen. A lot of people said Trump ran on this non-interventionist policy, and then he got into these things. But I do get that if he went in there and did an about face, he might have been impeached day one, because essentially all these politicians are all bought and paid for by the military-industrial complex, and much of the world works in its stable order that we know today because of the military-industrial complex. I'm not saying that's what we want or desire. I'm just saying that is the current stability of the world. And I think the world could be much more free, much more prosperous, much more stable if we went to more freedom, more individual sovereignty, and less war. But for now, right now, there's always a transition that's ugly. And right now, that stability is there. So that is definitely one thing I'm watching. And we'll see what happens with the U.S. dollar, because that's the ultimate headshot to the United States. You don't have to EMP us. You don't have to bomb us. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to come up with superior technology with the military. All you have to do is attack the U.S. dollar head on. But, thankfully, no one's done that yet because China, frankly, and Russia, they like the stability themselves. So they don't want to rock the boat until I think everybody's kind of just positioning for the collapse of the U.S. currency. But I don't think anybody actually wants it to happen anytime soon. I mean, think about it. If you're Kim Jong-un, or you're in China, or you're Russia or Saudi Arabia, things are actually kind of working out for you if you're in power, clearly. So you're not looking to create massive volatility in the world and who knows how much unrest.
Now, you mentioned that, these countries, they are hanging on to the dollar right now. Some countries are, getting rid of their treasuries, they're de-dollarizing. But one thing for sure is that China and Russia, they're still purchasing a lot of gold. And a lot of countries are repatriating their gold. A lot of countries are purchasing their gold. Do you think they're preparing for the dollar to maybe go away or not be the reserve currency?
Absolutely. I think that is them in preparation of the inevitable. I think everybody knows it's going to happen, and it will. I mean, let's think about it. Even countries go away. There are resets to currencies. This is if you're planning out a country and you're looking at 10 years, 30 years, 50 years, 100 years, or even 1,000 years, you can actually make very clear-headed decisions. And one of the most crystal clear decisions you could make is that the U.S. dollar is a temporary situation. Now, I don't know if it's going to last 6 months or another 50 years. We'll see. A lot of people say it's backed by nothing. I used to be one of those people. But clearly, it's backed by 134 bases around the world in these different countries. It's backed by 4,000 nuclear warheads. It's backed by the SWIFT system. It's backed by a lot of things, actually. Now, does it have any intrinsic value? No, but it is backed by a lot of things that would make it difficult to undo it. There's not even really an alternative currency that's liquid for the world to move on to. So I think they're definitely making their positions because it's inevitable. But I definitely don't think that China's buying gold because they think the dollar is going to be gone next year.
Now, what about gold as a weapon? Because lately we've been seeing gold move up. So if gold continually, rises, increases, what do people do with the dollar? I mean, how does everyone view the dollar if gold goes up to 1,400 to 1,500? Then what happens?
I think we're going to actually see that in 2019, where gold will go to 1,400 and at least 1,500. The bull market for the gold market, it's all there. The underpinnings, my goodness, this is going to be, forget about all the finance stuff. If you were just focusing on supply and demand and the supply pipeline or lack thereof for gold, there hasn't been a major discovery in 20 years. Gold is one of the biggest no-brainer investments you can make right now. And when it comes to how gold will be viewed as it rises, I think that's certainly the canary in the coal mine. So you're going to start to get Western investors involved in gold if it starts to break new highs or new 52-week highs. That's certain. If it really becomes a dollar issue, though, that's where institutions start to go into gold. And there isn't a lot of gold, but there's a lot of institutions and trillions of dollars of wealth. So as my friend Doug Casey talks about, it'll be like the Hoover Dam trying to go through a garden hose. And that alone could cause gold to go to 5,000, 10,000 an ounce, just purely based on a reallocation of capital. And it wouldn't take much. I was actually talking to Rick Rule yesterday, and we was basically talking about like it's a tenth of 1%, or maybe even less than that, of assets involved in gold with these institutions. If it just went to 1 or 2%, I think historically it's as high as like 4 or 5. You're talking about, a lot of cash going into something where there's not a lot of it. I just did basically a report on this exact thing at futuremoneytrends.com/gold, where it basically goes over these exact scenarios where you have either a monetary crisis or just a rally in gold, which could spark a monetary crisis.
You said gold's going to go, could go to 5,000, 10,000. But let's say it goes to 2,500, 3,000, 4,000. Won't people then say, something? Wait a minute, gold is moving up. Maybe I should get out of dollars and purchase gold. And if this does happen and gold continually rises, how do people view the Fed? How do people view the U.S. dollar? Do people say, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? Because normally when something like this happens, there's something wrong with the paper currency.
Absolutely. And if gold goes past 2,000, there's going to be serious problems because as much of a gold bull as I am, I don't want it to go down like this. I've got a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old. I too like the stability that we have, at least for the time being. And once gold crosses 2,000 and it goes from a gold bull market to the mind shift will shift to fling out of a currency or a fiat currency, because let's remember, gold is in a bull market in basically every fiat currency in the world except for the dollar, although I think we're at the first stages of the bull market. The real risk is to all fiat currencies, because if the dollar, if people start choosing gold over the dollar, or see that there's a threat or a risk in the dollar and start hoarding gold or buying gold, essentially, it's not as if everybody's going to get out of the dollar and diversify into Swiss francs and renminbi and yen and hold some gold. No, it's like they're going to get out of the dollar and into gold and silver or other hard assets. And that is when you could have a currency crisis. Right now, we're not seeing that. We're actually seeing the gold and the dollar rise together. We've seen that since 2015, essentially. Both gold and the dollar are up. Gold was 1,041. It's over 1,300 now. If you look at the dollar index, it's been a straight shot up since 2015. So that is an interesting thing. But of course, as you know on your show and with all your guests, we are in just ridiculously unprecedented times where you've got negative interest rates and quantitative easing and so many strange things happening in the economy. It doesn't surprise me that we do have an anomaly here where both the dollar and gold are going up together and the stock market's going up with it.
If gold goes up, what about like the European nations? What about the central banks, the IMF, the ECB? The ECB is in negative interest rates right now. And if gold starts to move up here in the United States and we see it, say manipulation is completely stripped away and we see gold move up, what happens around the world then?
I think that question, people just rewind it for a minute or 30 seconds and just listen to you, you'll realize why there's such suppression in the gold market. they can't really allow this to happen. This is kind of a ninth inning, 2 outs, runner on third situation for the central banks. They are going to do everything they can to suppress the gold price. They're going to do everything they can to shake people's confidence and scare people either into fiat currencies, the US dollar, anywhere but gold. Because if gold becomes something where the entire globe goes into, I mean, look at what happened with Bitcoin. It's gone from pennies all the way as high as 20,000. Gold in the 1970s went from 35 to over $800. We just saw palladium go from a few $100 to I think it's at $1,400 right now. These things can occur and they can occur fast. What's interesting about gold is that it's been suppressed. So when you look at what's happening with the ECB, they're already in a mess. So a higher gold price of 2,000. Honestly, we could be looking at central banks going into tailspins here. And if that happens, unfortunately, I know people want gold at 5,000, some investors, but honestly, guys, it will totally suck if gold goes to $5,000. You will be cashing out your gold or converting it into other assets, and the world will be a mess. So hopefully we don't see gold 5,000. Hopefully there's some sort of smooth transition. I've always suspected that usually what we're all thinking is not what's going to happen, right? So what do people think? China's going to sell the dollar. There's going to be a dollar. Something else, something that we're not seeing will be the most likely scenario. Of course, we have no idea what it is because we're not thinking about it. But all these scenarios that we're thinking of, that's definitely probably not going to be it. So one thing I thought of, who knows, maybe on the eve of a dollar crisis, the Federal Reserve and the President and the Treasury Secretary come out and institute a new currency. Or maybe they're in talks already with other countries about some sort of multi-currency, 6 currencies and gold in it. I mean, I have no idea. We don't have any idea, right? But there is a reason why China and these other countries are buying physical gold. And it's an unproductive asset. Its purpose is protection and preservation. Why is China and Russia and these other Eastern Central banks buying gold? That's the big question. Because they're not buying it because it pays a yield. They're buying it because they're worried about something.
Do you think Trump could use gold to either bring down the Fed or take over the Fed? Now, Trump is a big proponent of gold. You can see how he continually contradicts Jerome Powell, who's in the Fed. Do you think eventually he might try to nationalize the Fed?
That's a great question. I don't know if he'll try to nationalize it because, as you know, both the Republicans and the Democrats, just like the military-industrial complex, they're going to do everything they can to protect the Fed. And for Trump to do that, they might call that something where he's overreached on his powers. They might come against him and even impeach him. But it is interesting that Trump does like gold. He's talked about gold before. I know he received gold as payment from Amex, who was one of his tenants. So he's actually received gold as payment, as money. And of course, he loves gold. If anybody just Googles his suite in Trump Tower, his door is all gold. It's beautiful. But no, I don't think he's going to nationalize the Fed unless we were in an absolute crisis and state of an emergency. Otherwise, we have to keep in mind the Federal Reserve is in charge of creating money. You have empires, you have money, and you have religion. Those are kind of the 3 things that have motivated people and kept people in line and within coordination of Homo sapiens. The Fed is in charge of one of them. And I would say that they're probably the strongest one. So if anything, I think the Fed just gets rid of the president. I mean, let's be real. Before, why would they ever get nationalized when they could simply raise the interest rates to 4% and collapse the entire U.S. economy?
Let me ask you this. Do you think Trump is controlling Jerome Powell?
No, I think he's doing his best. Now, if he had gotten a real insider from the Trump administration to do it, then I would say maybe there's some good guy. I forget what his name was. There was a guy years ago, he would say Greenspan was a good guy and he was like undercover and, trying to fight for the good guys. And, I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't think Jerome Powell's one of those guys. He doesn't come from the Trump circle. He doesn't come from the libertarian circle. There's no evidence of that. So I don't think he's controlling him. I do think there was political pressure. But we also don't know. Everybody says that Trump won against Jerome Powell. We don't know what his next move is on the Fed side. Maybe Jerome's going to say, you know what? Let's let Trump have this victory, because in a year from now, I'm going to raise interest rates 3 times in a row. The economy is going to be in deep recession. Stock market will be at 10,000 by the time the November election comes around in 2020. That could be a scenario that the Fed is thinking that, hey, let this guy have his win right now.
But couldn't Trump use that against him? Because, I mean, look what happened when Jerome Powell was raising the interest rates. Trump continually tweeted out, look, every time the Fed raises rates, the stock market comes down. This happens, they're ruining the economy. So if Jerome Powell decides, afterwards to raise the rates, and Trump continually points at Jerome Powell saying, listen, every time he does this, he's destroying my economy. I made the economy great, and every time he raises it, it destroys the stock market. It destroys, other things. And when everything is all said and done, everyone will be staring at the Fed going, why did you do that? Why did you destroy the economy?
And that's brilliant of Trump to put it out there in such a public debate. I think Trump, just like China's buying gold, I think Trump also in his heart of hearts knows that this thing is a ticking time bomb. And yes, he's gone full throttle on it, and he's trying to perhaps create a better infrastructure for us for when we ultimately have a reset. Or maybe he really does believe that you can fake it till you make it, and maybe we'll just grow our way out of this. Maybe he believes that. I don't know. If Trump has made it publicly that the Fed is the bad guy, I think it's smart of him as a politician because he is already shifting the blame to the Federal Reserve. And I would agree with that, actually, that assessment. I mean, look, let's be honest. The Fed's got us here. And if the Fed adjusts the interest rates too quickly, we're going to be right back into a severe, maybe the worst recession ever, because we're more in debt than ever.
Do you think it's possible to get rid of all this debt that we have? I mean, it's trillions and trillions of dollars.
So I've talked to 2 congressmen. I'm not going to mention their names. One was a Democrat, one was a Libertarian Republican. I bet everybody can guess who that was. And both of them had the same answer, that everybody in Congress knows that the debt is a huge problem, but they also know that there's nothing they can do to fix it. And that comes from 2 legislators. One of them is active right now in D.C., and he was a Democrat. I mean, he wasn't some fiscal hawk or anything, or Ron Paul libertarian. He was a guy who hated Trump, and I was sitting there talking. We were talking about the cannabis market, actually. And, I asked him about that before we left. I said, what do you think about the national debt? And he said, our feeling on it amongst ourselves is that we're just going to have to keep driving until it goes off a cliff, and then we'll be able to do something about it. So I think most politicians, they actually have just accepted that until there's the big crisis, the big one, there's just nothing going to be done. So in their mind, until between now and that big, because people are desperate for help, they're just going to keep going and pushing forward on this because the alternative to try to fix it is too painful and just not an electable situation. See, no one's willing to all come together and hold hands and step off the bridge together. So Republicans, as much as they want to fix it, they're not going to do it. As much as the Democrats may want to fix it, they're not going to do it, because whoever tries to fix this is going to blow the whole damn thing up. And no one wants that on their hands.
So where do you think we are headed now? I mean, we're coming up to, we're in 2019 right now. We're coming up to 2020. We have the elections once again. Do you think it's possible that Trump will be reelected once again? And where does he go from here if he is reelected? Because I know when we started out, we talked about the mainstream media, how they were saying there was a recession during the election year, and it looks like they might have, wanted to blame him for the economy failing. If he wins or loses, where do we go?
I think Trump has set himself up for a fairly easy win here and a serious electoral college victory, a landslide electoral college-wise. Because the fact of the matter is he has helped bring a lot of jobs back and has created an environment. If nothing else, the optimism and the cheerleading. I know people don't think that means anything, but the wealth effect of having somebody's 401k higher or their home prices higher is that same wealth effect that Trump is doing to all these businesses, where you're cutting tons of regulations back, you're cutting their taxes, and it's causing businesses to be more optimistic, giving them their own wealth effect. of hiring more employees and creating more things and reinvesting in the business. So I think Trump will win a re-election electorally, probably by a landslide. For nothing else, that these states like Michigan, these states like Ohio, he has delivered on much of what he promised. And his base is not going to let him go. Rasmussen has him at 52% right now. I think Obama was around 49 or 50 during the same time in his presidency. And this is despite having an onslaught of news that is always negative, always crazy. But for the media, they played their hand too much. Trump will blink and they'll say he's signaling white power. So now they're not even taking credibly, which is actually kind of a sad thing, right? Because, you want a media in any country, but now they've exposed themselves to be so over the top that nobody takes them credibly. I mean, I even have friends of mine who are Democrats, who hate Trump. Even they roll their eyes at this shit now. I mean, it's gotten crazy. It's gotten old. It's just an unfortunate thing. I guess we're fortunate that they've been exposed, but it's unfortunate that the country is in the disarray it's in, and the media has just completely written themselves off, and they're completely not relevant anymore.
Daniel, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can people see all your work?
If you guys go to futuremoneytrends.com, you can subscribe to the Weekly Wealth Digest. I have free advertisers as well as companies that are venture capitalist type companies. We have a business relationship with them. I only partner with the companies that I invest in. So if you see it on futuremoneytrends.com, I am absolutely invested in it. And the majority of our investments, we're focused on hard assets outside of the stock market. Just go to futuremoneytrends.com, subscribe. If you guys are interested in gold, futuremoneytrends.com/gold. I'll have a killer report for you guys.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Dave.